think it's a great class. One, I think Dr. Robin and I were fascinated by. And we'll talk a little bit more about him later. But today we have, on top of the expertise of Dr. Robin, a true expert on the matter, and a true living legend, and a great friend, an ex-Washingtonian. But we'll talk briefly about him later. What I can tell you is that tomorrow I'm going to Haiti. I'm going to Port-au-Prince. It's going to be my 15th or 16th trip. And so it's so in line with what we are going to be addressing today, which is hunger and food waste. And the only two thoughts I'm going to give you is very funny, right? Because now since I began going more to Haiti, and I come back home and I'm sitting on the table, right? And I'm eating with my daughters, and it's kind of the typical thing. I don't know if your mom or dad told you, but I grew up listening this to my mom. Hey, you should eat what's on your plate, because some people don't even know what a full plate is. And it seems like that was mom being mom, but now I grow up, I see how much truth and how deep her words were beyond what I saw on an unfinished plate I didn't want to eat. But especially on the food waste, it's funny, right? How many of you throw something garbage because it was on the refrigerator for too long? It's beautiful, right? Because now we have power and we're rich and we have refrigerators. We buy so much of it in case we don't have enough, that at the end we keep throwing food garbage, right? If you come with me to the streets of Port-au-Prince, actually, even if they're poor, people are throwing things out, garbage, because in this case, they have things but they don't have a refrigerator. So to me, it's so unbelievable that we are 1 hour away by plane from Miami. And some people in Miami are going to be throwing garbage food because they buy too much and they have a refrigerator. And other people that actually technically are hungry, they're also throwing food because they don't have a refrigerator. This only gives me the amazing complicated world we live in, where a simple, humble refrigerator can be the same problem, the lack of it, or a problem because having too many of them. So this is what is fascinating about this issue between all of us. Over the next years, we're going to have to find out true solutions where these becomes opportunities. So anyway, that was my little thought. And when I come back, hopefully next week or the week after, I'll do a little tweet or report back on what I saw in Haiti in this last week. So Dr. Robin.
Great. I have a lot of ground to cover in our lecture today, so I am going to jump into this. I do want to say, though, for the next 2 weeks, we are also going to be talking a bit about the hunger and food security issue. Actually, Tony Castleman, who just joined us today, is going to be our speaker next week. He's going to be talking a little bit more about global, international issues around this. So for today, I think Robert and I are going to focus a little bit more on domestic issues around hunger and food waste. So just know that I'm not ignoring the rest of the world. We're going to be talking about that in the next 2 weeks, but I'm going to focus today on domestic issues. So a lot of us, when we think about hunger, when we think about people who don't have enough to eat, think about these types of pictures. And this is a picture of, here on the left is Kwashiorkor, on the right is marasmus. These are conditions that we typically see when people go for long periods of time without getting enough adequate calories, without enough protein, without very much food to eat at all. But how many of you have ever seen this before in person? Jose. And maybe a few hands poking up. It's not something we typically see in the United States. This is much more of the typical pictures of hunger in the United States. And what's different about these pictures? Yes. Right. It's not that typical idea we have of being malnourished. We have a very different situation when we talk about hunger and when we talk about lack of access to food and inadequate food intake here in the United States, where people in the previous pictures go for long periods of time, maybe without eating anything, or having very little, very small amount of calories during the day. What typically happens in our country is that people may have food for the first half of the month, and then at the end of the month, their benefits run out, and they don't have enough food to carry them all the way through. Or they might have enough food to kind of spread things out pretty thinly, so they're eating some food during the day, and so we don't quite see the same wasting diseases that we may see internationally. And you're absolutely right. Obesity is actually a very big issue among people in our country who have limited access to food. Why is that? We talk about there being an obesity, hunger-obesity paradox. Why do we have that in this country? And there's actually been quite a bit of research in the public health nutrition field to show that this is a very legitimate concern, and there's some very good reasons why we see this. The first is that in this country, the least expensive foods tend to be the highest in calories. I'm going to show you a picture here of McDonald's dollar meal. McDonald's buys in bulk, and they make great deals. It's all part of their business plan. There's no way any one of us individually can go out and buy the hamburger, buy the buns, have all the kitchen equipment to do a McDouble for only $1. It would cost us much more money.
Dr. Robin, I buy in bulk too, and I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, even at Jose's restaurant, you don't pay $1 for a hamburger. So we do know that the least expensive foods tend to be the highest in calories. And these people know how to make their food budget stretch as far as possible. When you're hungry, when you've got children to feed, you're going to try and get the most for the money that you have available to buy food. Unfortunately, it tends to be high calorie. Even for people who are on nutrition assistance programs in this country, you can still have limited access. We'll talk about the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program in a little bit. It was never meant to be a sole source of providing food for families. And so what happens very often when people are on nutrition assistance programs, I had mentioned before, they get their benefits at the beginning of the month, they go out and they buy their food, it lasts fairly well through the first part of the month, and then they are having to kind of scrimp and get by for the rest of the month. And we know that inconsistent access to food, we have a very natural biologic response to conserve energy, to conserve calories, to store that energy for those famine times. And so these people, we know, go through these up and down cycles on a monthly basis. It just sets them up metabolically to become overweight and to store those excess calories. I do have down on here that lack of nutrition knowledge is one potential reason. They may not know, what are the best nutritional choices to make to limit weight gain in the family. Although there have been a lot of studies that show that actually isn't as much of a problem as we think it is. Most people know that we should be eating lots of fruits and vegetables, and we should be eating fresh fruits and vegetables on a regular basis. It's much more these other issues in terms of access to those food items, the time it takes to prepare some of these meals and to prepare healthful foods. If you're working 2 or 3 jobs, it's a lot easier to go to McDonald's and buy off the Happy Meal or the dollar meal, or to buy processed foods and to do something quick that you can do in the microwave, or ramen noodles where you can just pour hot water over it. So we know that it's not as simple as just providing additional nutrition knowledge to solve this problem. One thing that we didn't mention in the introduction to the class, I know we have 4 different groups working on SNAP-related final projects. So I hope some of you are picking up some of these issues and going to go off and address it, at least a piece of some of these issues for your final project. I do want to take just a minute to talk semantics. I know that this has been a recurring thing for me. I think it's really important that if you're going to work in this area and you're going to talk about these things, that you use the terms appropriately. And I will tell you that the definitions we use around food access have been a constant source of arguments over the years and a constant source of debate. We're all familiar with the word hunger. Hunger is actually defined by the USDA as the uneasy or painful sensation caused by a lack of food and the recurrent and involuntary lack of food. So we do have an actual definition. Although hunger is kind of subjective. I could be hungry because I skipped lunch today. But someone who is chronically food insecure could be hungry because they haven't had a meal at all today, or they haven't, they've only had meals a couple of days during the week. And so the meaning of hunger has different meanings for different people. We think about it as being a very subjective term. You will find many of us who work in the nutrition advocacy area and food access area talking about hunger because it's a very emotional word. It's something we can all relate to. It produces the anxiety we want people to feel about this issue. But the federal government wants to have something a little more concrete to measure when they do the surveys of the population to determine who is food secure and who is food insecure. And so they've come up with a little bit more formal definitions. Food security means that you are secure in your ability to access food. You are able to access food at all times, and you have enough food for an active, healthy life. We can think about it being nutritionally adequate, safe foods, and acceptable foods, socially acceptable foods. It's not just that you can get enough calories, you can get enough protein. It's that you can get the foods you want to eat, the foods that make sense for your cultural background. Food insecurity, on the other hand, refers to any time where you're not food secure, where you have concerns about where your next meal is going to be coming from, or you don't have enough money, or there isn't a grocery store in your area, so you're not able to access the foods you need, the foods your family needs to have an active and healthy lifestyle. I like this quote from the UN Food and Agricultural Organization. Food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious foods to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. I think they've done a great job of capturing all the things we would want for everyone. It's a lofty goal. It's something that we should all be striving for. It's difficult to actually attain. I do want to, again, bring it back to some of the domestic issues. The USDA has an economic research service that keeps track of food security in this country and tracks it on a regular basis for us. They have a number of definitions that they use to define food security and food insecurity. We have a couple of levels within each. Among food secure, we have high food security, which I would think would be most of us in the room. We don't really have to worry too much about where our food is coming from. We are able to, when we're hungry, we are able to go out and buy what we need to satisfy whatever it is that we're looking for. People with marginal food security once or twice a month may have some problems locating food, may have to stretch their food dollar out until the next paycheck comes in. But for the most part, they're able to go out and buy whatever it is that they need. On the flip side of this, and this is where we tend to focus quite a bit, the food insecurity. We have low food insecurity where people are having to make choices about the quality of the foods that they have, the variety, the desirability. They're shopping at a grocery store maybe they wouldn't prefer to shop at, but it's where the cheapest prices are. They have some reduced food intake, but with assistance or careful planning, they can maybe make things work. It's the very low food insecurity where people are repeatedly having to change their eating patterns, reducing their food intake that we are especially concerned about too. You may, if you're interested in this issue, you may have seen these charts before. These are trends in the prevalence of food insecurity over time in the US. Again, this is USDA Economic Research Service data. There we go. And you can see right here in 2008, when we had the economic downturn, it really hit the middle class pretty hard. We see some big jumps here in both food insecurity and very low food security. And that's sort of plateaued, although we are now getting into the point where we're starting to see small decreases in the incidence of food security, or food insecurity in this country. But you know, we're hovering right around 14.5%, which I'll show you in a minute. Interesting studies from my economist colleagues. The US government puts together what we call the Healthy People projections for 2010, 2020. And we have food security listed as one of the indicators that we're working towards a certain goal that by 2020, one of the goals is to bring this level of food insecurity, we're talking about the purple bar, not the very low insecurity, but bringing this purple bar down to 6%. That's a pretty dramatic decrease in numbers, to go from 14.5% of the population down to 6% of the population. So we certainly want to do this. But what I think is the most telling and tells us that it can be done is that when we take our own definitions for food security and apply it to other developed countries in the world, our neighbor, Canada, their current level is only 7.3% of people who are food insecure. So it tells us that as a society, it is possible for us to reach single digits and to bring that number of food insecure people in our population down. Here's just another graphic showing the 2012 data for food security status in this country. Again, here's the 14.5% that I had mentioned earlier of the population who are categorized as food insecure, and 6% have very low food security. This is data from Feeding America, and if we have time, I'm going to show you one of their data videos. If you go to this website here, you can get the data for different states across the country. But this is the data for the District of Columbia. And as you can see, for 2012, 2010, we were at 16.5%. So a little higher levels of food insecurity here in the district compared to the rest of the country average. Here's the whole map if you want to quickly pick out your home state and find out where you are in comparison to the national averages. Darker colors indicate above the US average for food insecurity. Again, if you want more specific details, you can go to the Feeding America website and get their actual data. So I wanted to take a minute and talk about some of the federal programs and some of the non-federal programs that this country has to try and address the issue of food security and food access. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP, I know a lot of you are familiar with that term, is probably our biggest nutrition safety net in this country. It's a federal program. It's administered by the USDA, actually implemented by the states. So the states have some discretion in running the program. But it's an entitlement program. It is, the federal government is committed to provide whatever money it takes to provide services to all of the people who meet the requirements for being a part of the SNAP program. And as a result, it is the largest portion of the US Farm Bill. It was nearly $80 billion in fiscal year 2012. So hopefully with the economy getting a little bit better, that number is going to come down a bit. Also with some changes in reimbursement issues with the supplemental ERA funding ending, those numbers will change a little bit. But still, you can see that it's a very large portion of the Farm Bill. And this is why we talk about it so much. But to give you a really broad overview, who's eligible for the SNAP program? As you can see, the income, they sort of look at two different ways. And I will say that qualifying for SNAP benefits is a rather complicated logistical thing to go through, and it varies by the number of people in your family and which other assistance programs you participate in. But in general, gross income of less than 130% of the federal poverty standard. So in fiscal year 2012, that was a family of 4 making $2,400 a month. The monthly net income versus gross income, about $1,800 a month. And then there's a number of other secondary criteria that I haven't listed out here. I have given you the website for the SNAP program where you can go and get a lot more of the details if you're interested in looking at how that works. But I will tell you it is a pretty complicated formula to determine. What I think is just staggering is the number of people who actively participate in the SNAP program. We have almost 47 million Americans on the SNAP program. 1 in 7 of us will be on the SNAP program. 22.3 million households. These are really big numbers if you think about it. The other thing to remember is that nearly half of the SNAP participants are children. These are very, very necessary programs that we run. The one other thing that I do want to mention is a lot of you will do the SNAP challenge, and I just want you to think about some of these numbers. In fiscal year 2012, the average monthly benefit per person in DC was $138 a month. Think about that in terms of how much you all have spent just today on food, and multiply that by 30, and how difficult that would be to live on that amount of money. It works out to be about $4.50 a day. I would be really impressed if some of you could find lunch on campus for that amount of money, let alone 3 meals a day. So yes, it is a very important, helpful program for a lot of people, but it is by no means a free ride for these people. It is not an easy life if you are eligible for SNAP benefits and trying to make ends meet and raise your family on this amount of money. So very important program. There are a number of other programs that are part of what we call the nutrition safety net, the federal programs that support people who are food insecure. One of the other really well-known programs is the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, otherwise known as WIC. Many of you may know this program. This is actually a program that is not part of the Farm Bill. It's actually part of the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act. And that bill is coming up for renegotiation, hopefully in the next couple of months. So I would hope that those of you who care about this issue will care about preserving WIC funding and advocate to your legislators to continue to support the WIC program through the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Program. But we also have a number of other programs that serve children who are food insecure in this country. The National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program. We have a summer program. Awareness that for a lot of kids, the school lunch program, the school breakfast program is one of their more consistent sources of food during the day. So what happens to these kids when we go on summer vacation and they don't have the daily school lunch program to help them? So that's where we're kind of trying to fill the gap with this summer food service program. Other programs to make sure they get enough calcium to grow big and strong, and fruits and vegetables to get all the nutrients that they need. And then there's another set of programs that we have that are not to individuals, but to support other agencies. We have the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations, and the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP, that provides commodity foods, excess foods, surplus foods, to get it redistributed through these other agencies to people in need. I do want to take just a minute, and I think I'm making good enough time here that I do want to show you this video too. We do have some great non-governmental food assistance programs as well, food banks and food pantries, soup kitchens. So we do have some other programs. These programs really got up and running to fill the gap of the federal programs. Again, the federal programs weren't meant to completely meet individuals' needs. They were meant to supplement people's food needs. But we realized that that wasn't working real well, and we needed to have some other ways to assist the needy in our communities. And so these programs really started to take off in the 1980s with some of our earlier ups and downs in the economy, and have taken off to be wonderful partners in that food safety net to help people who are food insecure in this country. So now I am going to try and get this back up again. There we go. Pretty interesting statistics, isn't it? I think one of the things that I like the most about the data presented in here is it shows that food insecurity can happen to anyone. You saw the graphic that came across that said many of these people have college degrees. Getting the education that we're all lucky enough to have doesn't necessarily protect you from someday being food insecure. And so I personally feel that it's part of our responsibility to each other to support each other on some of these food issues. So anyways, this information came from their 2010 survey. They are just about to release a 2014 survey, probably within the next couple of months. So look for some updated numbers. The thing that I can tell you over the past 4 years is, again, the economy is starting to strengthen, so we're seeing a bit smaller numbers, but there's still a significant portion of our own population at need and at risk for food issues. All right, take a moment to move on to the next topic. And for some people, you may think that we're switching gears here, switching to a totally different topic. But as I want to say here, one of the reasons that we put these two together, that Jose insisted that we have these two topics together, is that the two actually go hand in hand. If we can we come up with ways that the food we produce is used more efficiently and create a situation where we can help food security for people in our country and globally. The issues apply globally as well. I know Robert's going to talk a little bit about this, or I'm hoping he'll talk a little bit about this, because that's what DC Central Kitchen and his new Project LA Kitchen is involved with in terms of food recovery and food redistribution to people who need the food that's surplus in this country. My goal today, again, for both parts of this lecture, really are to give you the background, to give you the academics, the terminology, the numbers, and let Robert be our inspiration for today. So this is information from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. I just think, even though they're really focused on the environmental issues of food waste, a lot of it applies to what we're talking about and what we're thinking about today in terms of hunger and food waste. In this country, more than 36 million tons of food waste are produced annually. That was the number from 2011. 96% of which we throw out in the garbage. It goes to landfills and decomposes in those landfills, generating methane and other undesirable components, potent greenhouse gases. So there's definitely an environmental reason that we want to decrease food waste in this country. And if you have food waste, please compost it. Please don't throw it in your trash. But the big second bullet there that I have bolded is that food potentially could have been redistributed to households that are food insecure. And there is a growing group of programs like DC Central Kitchen, like some other smaller groups across the country, who are trying to be the middleman to coordinate some of those between grocery stores, between restaurants, and other organizations to help get food to the people who really do need it. Obviously, for businesses, there's an incentive there as well. Wasted food is wasted money. So we do want to do a better job of planning how we use food and how we purchase food and how we even produce food. Just like we had different definitions for food security and food insecurity, we have different definitions for food waste. I do want to say food waste is kind of the global term that refers to any reduction in edible food mass anywhere along the food chain. Again, this is USDA's Economic Research Service definitions, but it's what most of us kind of operate under. We also will sometimes refer to food loss, which is any edible food that we may lose due to a variety of different reasons, but shrinkage, moisture loss, molds, pests, that type of thing. And then food recovery is a separate sort of issue. It's the actual collection, the recovery of these foods that would otherwise be wasted and go into landfills, and then redistributing them to people who need them. So again, very well-defined terminology that we use when we talk about food waste. I have this slide in here because, I'd like to show you how all of these lectures that we're having throughout the semester all tie in together. I hope you all remember when Dr. Foster was here talking about food supply chains. Food supply chain here. The reason I have it in this presentation is because I want to point out that food loss, food waste, can actually occur at every single step in the food supply chain. We have a tendency to focus on our own experience, which is the consumption stage, and to think about the foods that we didn't eat, but we had bought, things that had gone bad in the refrigerator, as Jose was mentioning. But actually, food waste occurs at all stages, and here's just some examples of all of the different places where food waste can occur and how it can occur. And things we need to be thinking about. How do we head some of these off or decrease the amount of food in each one of these aspects of the food supply chain? There we go. The other thing that I want you to think about and to keep in mind as you're reading articles, as you're reading popular press articles about food waste. There's a couple of different metrics that we use, and sometimes they're used interchangeably and can be kind of confusing. The EPA statistics that I gave you before were based on weight. That is a common way to think about it, so the weight of the food that is lost. What is used a little bit more commonly globally is thinking about food waste in terms of the amount of calories that are lost. If we're thinking about heading off a famine in some African country, we may be more concerned about how do we get adequate calories to a country. And so we may be thinking about food waste differently if we think about it by calories. What's interesting about this graphic is the different colors represent different food groups. So we have a tendency in this country to think about those fruits and vegetables that go bad on us, that spoil in the refrigerator because we don't get around to eating it. And so if you look at it by weight, this is global numbers. It's 44% of the food that is wasted in the world. But obviously, they don't contribute a whole lot of calories. So even though it's the biggest portion of food loss by weight, it's only 13% of food lost by calories. And so you want to make sure that you're following which metric whoever you're having talk about food waste is talking about, so you're clear about what you're talking about. The other thing that I want to point out is that there are some very big differences on where food waste, the biggest sources of food waste are in the supply chain by developed versus developing countries. This graphic shows it really, really well. In developing countries, which are the blue bars here, it's more likely that food gets lost in the production stage. So it gets left in the fields or dropped in the fields, or we have something happens with a storm or something like that that wipes out a crop, or we have bugs come in at a certain point in the crop. But they don't have as much food waste, as Jose was saying, in Haiti at the level of the consumer, because the consumer is very conscious about making sure that food stretches and that they use the food appropriately. There's some, but not quite the way that we have it here. The yellow bars are the developed countries, and so obviously the biggest portion of our food loss does come at the consumption stage. It does reflect our purchasing patterns, and so think about that as you're going out and you're buying food. We in this country have a tendency to go on a once a week, or for some people even a once a month grocery shopping trip, and then try and make things last throughout the month. Other countries, they tend to shop on a daily basis and have more fresh foods and buy what they feel like eating that day. So they're buying specifically what they know they're going to consume. And that's probably something that we should be thinking a little bit about to decrease the amount of food waste that we produce in this country. As you can see, this is yet another graphic that just shows where food waste occurs in different parts of the world. In North America, again, sorry, wrong button. In North America, again, 61% of our food waste is happening at the consumption stage. Whereas I'm trying to see how Haiti is in here, probably the Latin America area. It's a little bit more evenly distributed across the food supply chain. But in sub-Saharan Africa, very little food loss occurs at the consumer level. So something to think about and something to reflect on as we think about food waste. This, again, is from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's website. They actually have a food recovery challenge going on, which I actually think they're not using the term right. I think it's really a food waste challenge, and trying to encourage people to decrease food waste production in this country. And this is just a figure that we all try and really follow when we're thinking about food access, food recovery, and closing the food supply chain loop. It's always best if we can try and reduce the food that we are potentially wasting throughout all of the stages of the food cycle. But if we have to waste, if there is food that's potentially going to be wasted, we should definitely, as the second priority, try and get that to hungry people, get that to the people who need it. After that, we can also use it to feed animals. We can compost it, and as a last and final resort, send it to the landfill. So, all right, I wanted to make sure that we have enough time for our next speaker, and I think I have managed to get through.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. So, we're going to introduce Robert. He came from Los Angeles, where he's his new house. Robert Egger is being a Washingtonian at heart, and he has embraced what a true community leader should be all about. 25 years ago, after being an excellent bartender, where he still is, he saw that waste that was happening at the restaurant level was wrong, and he didn't like it. So instead of complaining, he went and took action. And out of this action forward, he kind of single-handedly created this central kitchen with a very simple idea. He thought that food waste was wrong, and that through that problem, he saw a true opportunity to create opportunity. And seeing the food waste that was going on around restaurants and around hotels in Washington, D.C., a way to, where others were only seeing a problem and a missed opportunity, he took that challenge and he transformed that into an amazing opportunity to be feeding the people in need. But he didn't only do that. He saw beyond the horizon. And he began transforming this central kitchen into this empowerment kitchen, where he didn't only empower people that maybe were homeless and hungry, but he also began empowering the community around the city and all together working in this central kitchen to make Washington a better city by using the power of food to fighting hunger and at the same time creating opportunities. He didn't stop there. After 25 years, he moved to LA, where he sees the farmland of LA as a true opportunity. He's going to tell us about it. And he has his dream at the end of the year to opening LA Kitchen, where he's going to put much of everything he's learned, everything he's put into practice over 25 years in DC, but kind of bringing the 2.0, whatever that is. We are all expecting to see what LA Kitchen is going to be all about. He's going to tell us more about it. Today we have here Mike Curtin. He's the executive director of this central kitchen and the man that has been taking the lead of Robert Egger over so many years. So I know this is a sales speech, but if you're looking a place to spend your time and donate your time and learn what an organization like this central kitchen is all about, please, that's a good place to spend whatever free time in this university leaves you. So Robert Egger is a great friend, a guy since I arrived in Washington 20 years ago, that besides the work I do cooking, he's a man that at least myself personally, and I know it's many more like me, gave us kind of a lighthouse to look. And that's why I see Robert. Like every time I'm lost and I don't know exactly in what direction we should be going, I look to the ideas and the hard work that Robert has been putting together. And I try always to say, I'm lost. Oh, there is the ideas of Robert Egger. Let's keep on moving towards that lighthouse. So, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Egger.
Thank you. Jose calls me a lighthouse. My wife calls me a dim bulb. We'll meet somewhere in the middle. But so much to talk about, so much in a very short period of time. So I'm going to talk faster than normal because I just want to really fill in a lot of very interesting blanks. Just so you know, I've spoken here many, many times, and particularly in this room. And one of the reasons I'm always enthusiastic about an opportunity to speak at GW is the kitchen was born right down the corner here at 21st and Virginia Avenue. It's where I fed the poor on a truck. I ran nightclubs and went out, and like many of you all, I didn't particularly want to go. I was a little bit reluctant, but two things happened. A, where's the food come from? And found it was purchased at the Safeway in Georgetown, which is the most expensive store on the planet. And secondly, and more importantly, when we started serving food, that again, I already knew restaurants throw away a lot of food. And young brothers and sisters, sometimes you take a class, you can't figure out why are they making me learn this, I'll never use it. When I was a kid, I had to do inventory control in restaurants, and it was a laborious, heinous part of running a business. But it was because of that class I hated that it was revealed to me how much food we threw away. So when I heard that we were buying food, it was like, ding, wow, you can get so much better food. And it wasn't just restaurants. A lot of my friends had gone to work in catering. Any of you all waited tables or tended bar in your life? You got to work hard to earn. When you're waiting a table, you got to work hard for your tips. Catering, you walk around with a silver tray. And a lot of my friends had moved in that, and they were complaining about at the end of the night, 2 o'clock downtown, party, half the people didn't show up, they just threw everything away because they, back at the caterer, the fridge is full of tomorrow's gig. So I was aware of the extent, restaurants, hotels, hospitals, how much food was thrown away. But what really struck me was when we went to serve people. They were outside in the rain, right down the street at these steam grates, and there was a line around the corner up the street of people waiting for this truck to arrive. And we dutifully started serving people, but I was shocked at the fact that I was in the warm truck serving people outside in the rain. And at the end of the line, the driver knew everybody by name and was saying, "See you tomorrow night." And that just really struck me as a citizen, as a person of consciousness, as a taxpayer, that this idea that somehow this system, and quite frankly, brothers and sisters, a lot of what you saw in the Feeding America thing is how we've institutionalized a system that's about the redemption of the giver, not the liberation of the receiver. And that's what interests me. How can you use food purposely to create a new formula? Jose and I really, it's funny how much, and it's frightening when I say this out loud, that we think alike. But it is, we're both highly interested in systems, and sometimes the eyes wide shut, the things that are right in front of you. And all I did was look at those people in line and say, I work in restaurants, there's plenty of jobs as well as food. Let's put the two together. And that really interested me. So a lot of what interested me is how do you use existing ingredients to make better things happen? But I'll tell you the other thing, and this is where I really want to jump ahead here, is there's today and there's tomorrow. And tomorrow took me to Los Angeles. Did you see anywhere in any of our stats today, seniors? We heard a lot about kids, and there's a whole system that raises money around childhood hunger, but the level of senior hunger has spiked 80% in the last 10 years. And you don't hear about them because A, there hasn't been really any in-depth studies, although something came out today that touches on Feeding America and Meals on Wheels just did the first survey in a long time. But the reality, the senior of today is very reluctant to talk about the fact that they're hungry. They're a prideful generation. They're your grandparents or great-grandparents, and they never ask for charity unless it's totally, something they're desperate to have. Less than 10% of the seniors who were eligible to take advantage of SNAP or Meals on Wheels, less than 10% take advantage of it. And so what I'm thinking about, and just so you know, I tend to work backwards. It's like, what's the solution I want, and what are the ingredients I have, and how can I use them to achieve this goal? So for us, when we started the kitchen, it was like, wow, there's unemployment, and there's hunger. If I put the two together, I can decrease the number of people who are hungry. But at the same time, I can use the new 24-hour news cycle to expose Americans to how much food we throw away, how much people we waste, and this unique opportunity, this idea that you can put the two together, two very unlikely bedfellows, if you will. The idea of food that used to be thrown away and homeless people, and that's what I started with. If you could take that food and train men and women for jobs, the restaurants that gave you food could actually get access to trained entry-level people who could show up on time and help them make more money. It was a really cool formula that the average American was like, that's pretty cool. Because what was interesting is when I started the kitchen, I had touched inadvertently, and sometimes you do this in life. You touch a nerve that you didn't know existed. And in my case, it was how guilty Americans were about the food they waste every day. When I said, in effect, I started a business and we get the food from the restaurants and the hotels at the end of the night, people were like, oh, dude, that's so cool, I can't stand it. I want to talk about job training and all that other stuff, but people were I was really unprepared for that. And I'm very intrigued because Americans are decent people. By and large, people give $300 billion a year to charity. People work hard. Your generation, and I know this for a fact because I've just done this. By the way, I didn't go to college, but because of the power of the commencement address, you're looking at Dr. Egger. I've spoken at so many universities over the years. But I already know the answer. How many of you all did service in high school? An entire generation raised doing service. To me, this is an amazing ingredient. You all are living, breathing activists. This is what turns you all on. This is probably why you're here. This idea that what Jose does every day. Jose is, for all intents and purposes, he's a chef, but he's decided to take his career to another level by really being a citizen activist. And I think for a lot of people, there's that sense of, I want a life in which I don't work here, and then do activism here and then play here. And this idea of I want my spirituality, my lifestyle, and my income to be meshed, a lot of us are the same way. How can we do all this at the same time? That's what I want. You know, but at the same time, and to get into where I'm really here to talk about is the future. I urge you to study, if you want to really get into hunger and food waste, it's demographics. What's coming around the bend? How can you be prepared for tomorrow? You know, there's three kinds of leaders, brothers and sisters. There's head down, I'm too busy. I can't lift my head up to see tomorrow. And that's cool. And that's a lot of people in our business. People who run pantries and food banks, they got to keep the lights on. They got to make payroll. They got to deal with a bigger line of people. I get that. But then there's people like you all, second group, that get to come to a class, hear speakers, hear about the future. And of that group, most will put their head back down and pretend they didn't hear. You know, I'm just going to do what I've always done. But I urge you all to consider with your life being the third kind of leader, which is how do you march out to the future and say, in effect, look, there's certain things that are likely, but they're not done yet. And I don't have to accept this. I can do something today. And that's why I went out to California, because the seniors are coming, my generation. And I know as much as many of you all wish the baby boomers would suddenly just vanish in the night, dude, short of an asteroid, we're here for a long time. And that's really a big deal, because if you really get down to brass tacks, man, you know, right now, I told you, senior hunger spiked 80%. And less than 10% take advantage of the system. So in other words, if it's spiked 80%, but only 10% have indicated they're hungry and come to the system, do you know what that really is out there? So you got them out there. You know, people who are reluctant to take charity, and if you give them anything, they'll say, thank you. Thank you for that cat food. I appreciate it. Serious. What's coming around the bend is a very, very different kind of senior. Imagine when 10, 20, 30, 40% of eligible seniors say, where is my entitlement? What does that look like economically for America? I don't know if you watched how the barnyard fight that was the Farm Bill, and how much got cut. Almost 10 billion got cut out of food stamps. So again, if you've got a very small percentage of people who are eligible for it taking, and right around the bend, there's my generation. And you know what's wild? Between workers right now, American workers between 45 and 60, less than half of them had 10,000 grand in the bank. 10 grand, that's it, for retirement. So you can see what's coming. So I know what's coming, and it isn't going to be hungry kids, it's hungry seniors, or hungry Americans. And by the way, just so you know, hunger is not about food. You know, we can talk a lot about, and it's cool to feed people, and it's fun not to waste. Hunger is primarily about wage. You know, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics just put out its predictions of the top 20 jobs over the next 20 years, and 60% pay less than 30 grand. You know, and that's the face of hunger. It's a working person who's earning an hourly wage or less than 25 grand a year, and they got 1 or 2 kids, and it's impossible to make up for this. And if you notice the triangle of how do we chip away, the very top one was reduction. And as cool as it is not to waste food, you've got an entire system of food banks and pantries that rely heavily on that food, because that SNAP benefit isn't that much. It's not that much money. So what people get is SNAP benefits, but they have to go to a pantry. And so what you've got is a system in which the food, and this is where many, many, many years ago, this is what really turned me on to the future, was, you know, when I first came out of nightclubs and started the DC Central Kitchen, if you wanted to become a chef, you went to Johnson & Wales, or you went to Culinary Academy, CIA, Culinary Academy of America. You went to 2 schools. That was it. And if you wanted to study hotel management, you went to Cornell or Purdue. That was it. Now, every community college, high schools have culinary programs. And what you've got is an army of people who want to be the next José, you know, and they might not make it that far, but I guarantee you they're coming out of those schools armed with the latest inventory control, science. They're coming in saying to a Marriott, your food waste is now here. If you hire me, I can cut it down 10%. So what you have, predictably, starting way back then, was that the food that me and Mike and others rely on is slowly decreasing. And more importantly, the nutritional content of that food is decreasing. You know, what you're getting in the pantry system, which, by the way, was invented in the 1960s for an able-bodied, unemployed person. That's who we served back then. The entire system was built around people who could wait in line and get a box of food and go home. Think about it. Who's hungry now? It's a single mom. That's the face of hunger, is a single mom with 2 kids. And she doesn't have time to wait in line. And she doesn't have time to go through an box of odds and ends made up of things that have dubious nutritional content, you know? And I'm going to toss one other wild card in there, which rarely gets mentioned in the role of obesity in America. Oftentimes we look for a villain. You know, it's going to be either it's a food desert, or it's wage, and it is those two things. But how many of you all have downed a pint of ice cream because you broke up with somebody? Depression. No one talks about depression and obesity. That just the grind, the epic grind of poverty is what causes a lot of this. My life sucks, and I want a bag of chips. You know, that very human idea of I just want comfort. And you know, tomorrow be damned, I just want something to take my mind away from the grind that is my life. I'm mesmerized by all of these things because as much as you go up to DuPont Circle or somewhere right around here and there's probably a farmer's market, what's fascinating is, in my opinion at least, those farmers markets and that enthusiasm around food isn't about food. There's a deeper hunger in America. And this is a very important part of what I'm fascinated by. People want to belong to something again. They want to be part of something. They want to help. They want to be part of community. So again, think about this. You have food, you have people, you have a government that's trying, you have individual mayors who are trying to find a new solution. You've got a generation of young people coming into philanthropy who are not interested in charity, but solutions, who want social enterprise and microcredit, unique opportunities. So when I left the DC Central Kitchens in the capable hands of my friend and colleague Mike Curtin, he had actually tagged something very profound. In my generation, you pretty much wait till the phone rang. The restaurant called. Hey, we've heard about you all. Come and get our food. You know, and the one thing that was really important was farms. You know, you would wait till a farmer called and said, my food's just about rotten. You can come and have it now, charity, and give me a tax deduction. Mike said, in effect, what happens if we offer you 5 cents on the dollar? And what he discovered is there was a whole bunch of farmers that were like, dude, where have you been all my life? Sold, business. And that's what allowed the DC Central Kitchen to go from a traditional charity to social enterprise. Because once you buy food, you can sell it, which means, as many of you all know, the DC Central Kitchen under Mike Curtin has been doing school food. We do locally, I gotta say they do. I have to get out of the habit of saying we. But 7,000 meals a day for DC public school kids, 5,000, close enough for rock and roll. They taste so good, it feels like 7. But I mean, again, locally sourced, cooked from scratch. One of the most amazing experiments in the United States around really healthy meals for kids. And if I may add, ethnically diverse too, which is rarely discussed. Doing it right here. And what he showed is you could do this for a remarkably low amount of money. I'm stealing Mike's idea. I'm going to LA because if you think about it, LA sits at the bottom of the most amazing funnel of fruits and vegetables in the history of the world. And of the 40% of the food we produce every day that is thrown away, half of that's fruits and vegetables. So in a system in which profit is starting to drive down the amount of food that's thrown away, the one thing you can count on long-term is fruits and vegetables. So LA, I can get that. But LA is also the home to the biggest concentration of older people living in poverty. And as I said, the oldest baby boomer is only 68. So what's coming around the bend, interestingly enough, and this is key to you young activists, is a generation of people who will be poor, to be sure, and lots of them, but they'll be wildly aware of nutrition and the role that food plays in their medical regime or their overall vitality. So unlike the senior or the poor person of today who says, whatever odds and ends you can collect, I'll take, the senior of the future is going to say, oh, no way. That'll kill me. I'm not going to eat that. What's coming is a senior that's going to actually want vegetarian and even vegan meals, which is interesting. And I'm going to go back to Jose because talk about food waste. One of the things that I love about Jose's thinking is sometimes it's an eyes wide shut. What's right in front of you, how could you have not noticed it? And if you really think about the food system, and you know what drives a lot of food in America is federal reimbursement. School food, prison food, meals on wheels, all that stuff. But think about it, what do all of those meals, schools, hospitals, prisons, Meals on Wheels, what do they all have in common? The plate. And all of a sudden, you know, it's funny, when you think about it, oh my God, the plate is the problem. The 4-compartment plate that says, here's where the big piece of meat goes. You know, and that entire construct of meat at the center, it's not sustainable, it's not healthy, right? So if you suddenly stop and you realize, wait a second, if I step back and basically remove the plate, I'm free. I can reinvent. And what I'm looking at is a bento box, 6 small compartments versus 4 in which you can spread the protein. Federal government says, in other words, to get reimbursed for Meals on Wheels, you must have 4 ounces of protein. It's like, cool, I'm just not gonna put a nasty piece of chicken down, I'll divide it up. And that's where you can get in the rich variety and the more sustainable forms of protein. So whether it's tofu or quinoas, whether it's 2 pieces of shrimp, whether it's 1 piece of flank steak, you can start to really experiment. So we're almost doing what food trucks have done. You know, let's take Chinese and Peruvian and put those together. You know, again, why not? You have this rich opportunity. So, but the third thing LA has is the media. And that's what really, more than anything else, I think established the kitchen and I think helped play a really tremendous role in exposing the idea that, look, if we do this in Washington, you can do it in your town too. I mean, everything I built my business around is this idea of what's already here and how can you use it differently? How do you liberate your mind to see opportunities beyond the typical formula? Believe me, I get way too much credit. All I did was come along and say, there's wasted food, there's people that we undervalue, there's kitchens that are underutilized, there's a generation of volunteers, young and old alike, who want to be part of significant change. There's chefs who have food but also have jobs and will help teach. There's homeless people who want in out of the rain. It was all there. And it's one of the reasons I jump at every opportunity to speak at any school, but particularly George Washington University, where I've always felt the brain power is just a little bit tighter. You know, but that idea that you tilt your head and you see the world a little bit differently. That idea of, I know this is the way everyone else sees it, and I know this is the way everybody else does it, but I don't have to do it that way. I'm a GW grad. You know, I can do things a little bit differently, and that's the way I urge you. Like I said, I'm open. I'll talk to anybody, anytime. I'm easy to find. I'm R. Egger at LA Kitchen. We can be Facebook friends if you want, whatever you want, and I can help. I'm happy to do it. But you get my point. My only thing I want to convey today is there's so much to work with. There are big, 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 audacious problems, and they're real, and they're hard. But we shouldn't necessarily just run for the hills. And we shouldn't think, I fed a person, ergo they're not hungry anymore. You know, but there are dynamics within that formula that if removed and put back in at a different place, at a different time, at a different order, can actually reveal powerful opportunities. And that's all I'm about. You know, I wish I could claim, you know, I was on Oprah once. I got to be an Oprah angel. And as anybody who knows me, and particularly my friend Jerry, who I'm hanging out with a lot, I'm a sinner. I'm a joyful sinner. I try hard, but at best, I'm a sinner who's trying. But I assume that speaks to more of you in the audience than there are saints. You know, most of us are just decent people who are trying to be a better citizen, a better person. And I just would urge you to realize that food has tremendous power, that hunger is not about food, that all hunger is wrong. And even though we throw away an amazing amount of food, there's more than enough for everybody. But I urge you to really recognize that you could play a tremendous role as you go forward in your life. But just I urge you to see beyond the norm. Don't accept this idea that this is the way it's always been done. Really approach life in general with this idea of, I want to do it a little bit differently, and I'll tell you you can. So I'm going to open it up. I don't know whether we're doing question and answers now, but I think I probably jabbered enough. But I'll tell you anything you want to know about my life or where I'm going, just ask away. Is that a clap? Is that a clap? I'm down, you know. When I was a kid, it was like this, you know, so I'll take that if that's a clap, you know.
For the record, you said we're 3 types of leaders.
Head down.
We're doing number 3, to be clear.
Yeah.
Everybody in this room at George Washington
Is a third kind of
all of the third type.
Exactly. March out to meet the future.
Are we or not?
Yes. Yeah.
Just to be clear, I don't want you to leave from here with it wrong.
And the future's not out there, it's right here. It's today. Anybody, questions, comments, thoughts? Yes, please, just yell away.
When does volunteering for the LA Kitchens open up, or when are there abilities for people to start volunteering?
Well, you're volunteering right now by helping me think through ideas out loud, and I think a lot out loud, but we are doing pilot programs this spring and summer. I'm partnering with the St. Vincent Meals on Wheels, the largest provider of meals for seniors in LA. They only do 2,300 meals a day, and that's the biggest. And get this, they also, and I'm not being disrespectful because they're great partners, but they're very open about this. They contract to provide the American menu plan, which means in effect, LA, one of the most diverse cities in America, the American menu plan means white people food. and seriously, so that idea of there's no diversity in the menu, or unless they have a burrito or black beans, that's considered diversity, right? So think about that. From a business perspective, you have an unlimited supply of amazing fruits and vegetables. And the idea of taking the menu apart and putting it back together so you can do super nutritious, ethnically diverse, employing men and women. This time around, the job training, and we'll be doing our first 2 job training cycles at St. Vincent's Kitchen. Unique experiment. Younger men and women aging out of foster care, combined, matched with older men and women coming home from prison. Intergenerational. And I want you to really think about this, because one thing I noticed when I started doing the kitchen, we feed kids here, we feed seniors here. And food was always about community. It was always about family. Yet we made it about gas. Here's where the children's gas station is. Here's where the senior gas station is. And I'm more interested in this. So that they have peer mentoring. Can an older man who just got home from 25 years in prison say to a younger man or woman, I was you, and I fucked up. I'm not going to let you do that same thing. I think there's a powerful thing there. So we'll be doing food recovery, job training, but also menu development. Over the next few months, we're going to be working with chefs. And Jose is very, very helpful in organizing chefs from Los Angeles to come in and help us develop the individual menu plan. So that, again, when we go out, we will have tested with seniors. Because the worst thing you can be, in my humble opinion, is a nutritional imperialist, telling people what to eat. I'm going to tell you what's healthy for you. Like if I go into a senior center right now and say, hey, grandma, give me the fruit cup, there's a riot. Because that's something people are very close to. So the idea is be respectful of people, meet them where they're at, and guide people over to the other side. So the customer that I'm really thinking about is 5 years, 10 years away. I'm just building now for that inevitable customer. But I'm going to spend the next 5 years gently walking with people. And me, myself, I always say I got 2 things in my life I need to give up at my age. Tequila and meat. And it ain't going to be tequila. So I'm one of those reluctant carnivores that has always had meat on my plate, and I can't do that anymore. It's not healthy for me, and it's not sustainable. So with millions of other people of my generation, the experiment is how do we guide people from the old American concept of what a meal looks like to something that's healthier, more affordable, that gets to food waste, that empowers people, and ultimately helps them not just live longer, but live longer. But this summer. Yes?
Will a decline in small farms affect your business model?
In fact, I believe that at least, again, study, actually the growth of farms have been the small farmers. You'd think it's the big mono farms, it's actually small farms are growing. But I believe that the real connection for farms is going to be seniors. Right now, as Mike will tell you, school food, where a lot of the attention has been. We've partnered with Revolution Foods. You all might know some of their work. They're from Oakland, 2 women who started it, and it's been about school food. It's $2.80 for a school meal. It's $6 for a senior meal. Do you realize that? That's like literally double the amount of money. So I believe with 70 million baby boomers getting old, the vast majority who will not have the money in the bank for the 10 extra years that science will give them, the connection between their insistence on healthy and that reimbursement rate times the social enterprise model that I'm open source about. What I'm building in LA is designed, I'm doing it at a scale in LA that's different than I've ever done because I know the supply will be tractor trailers and I know the demand will be tens of thousands of meals. But the goal is to create a formula that works pretty much anywhere. But I do believe at the end of the day, that's the formula. But more importantly, and as much as I respect and sometimes try my best to tolerate the childhood hunger brigade, because I'm all hunger's wrong, period, don't divide. Kids don't vote, seniors vote. When you want to change food policy in America, just say to 78 million baby boomers, here's the food you're gonna get today based on the food policies and the reimbursement, here's what you could have. But if you want this, we have to loosen the regulations that make it easier. Right now, it's actually difficult. It's actually difficult to source local and cook from scratch. It's easier to buy a processed meal, pre-plated, shipped in from another city because you're guaranteed reimbursement because that's who wrote the rules, first and foremost. But no, actually, I believe that the connection between seniors and local food is going to be the real opportunity for this movement to grow exponentially.
Next. Remember that this class was always about synergies, right? That's what we're trying to improve. All the amazing synergies that food has with the world. I don't know if you're aware, but it's latest talk in Congress is about the minimum wage. President Obama is going to be careful. And here we're talking minimum wage. I think the most interesting thing we heard Robert said was actually when we talk about hunger and obesity, we're not talking about food alone, but we're talking about wages. So actually that Congress is thinking about White House, about what the minimum wage of America should be. We should be having the hunger and obesity groups lobbying behind. Because
Yes.
actually this is a very unlikely way to be fighting hunger in America. We're talking wages, but it's proving that we're talking so much more than that. So this is the amazing thing. We're talking hunger, but we're talking about how people can provide on their own. So we don't have to even give them a safety net, called snaps. We don't want safety nets. We only want safety nets in the event that something goes wrong. But we cannot keep running the country thinking like always something is going to go wrong. No, there's no go wrong. Let's raise the wages to everybody. So maybe all of a sudden we don't need such a big farm bill to cover the needs of people.
Yeah, the smartest way for you all to consider fighting hunger is start a business, but pay your workers a good wage. You know, that's really the future. In fact, to make that point, if I'm going to offer opportunities for older men and women young together, right? Now, LA's a different town because there's lots and lots of small businesses that will hire. DC, as we discovered here, has many corporate headquarters and corporate things that can't hire a felon, right? That's not the same. But nonetheless, I'm fully anticipating that the LA Kitchen will be a major employer of older men and women coming home from prison. But again, follow your brain. If that's the case, then I have to acknowledge that it does, no matter how much I pay an hour, and I think, you know, one thing I think Mike and I were justifiably proud is the DC Central Kitchen started people at $12.75 with an average $8,000 in benefits. But even if we do that, which we'll do, intellectually, I know that those men and women spent their earning years behind prison. So the only way I can create a system that feeds older, poor people a healthy meal, I can't create more older, poor people by the way I do that. So the LA Kitchen will incubate Strong Food, which is a revenue-generating separate business that LA Kitchen will own. That will be a profit-sharing business so that the men and women who work there will get a cut of the action into a designated retirement plan. So that not only will we have the coolest food anybody's ever seen and the most interesting system, and go back to that media, because what I want to do is challenge people's assumptions about hunger and poverty. Because what I want to say is ultimately, this is the kind of business that America needs more. Not one in which the CEO, who had the opportunity but decided against the idea that I deserve this much money, says in effect, no, I deserve, and what I want for all of our employees is a good middle-class salary with benefits and the notion that when they went home at night, they kicked ass during the day. You know, most people, if you ask them, give me what kind of job do I want? I want a job where I don't do harm, I do good, I get a modest good wage, I have some benefits, and I feel like I did something. That's the kind of business I want. But at the same time, I want to challenge Americans to see that hunger oftentimes is about where you shop. My friend Jerry up here played with a band in DC called Fugazi. And if you haven't heard of them, I urge you to look them up. They were one of the greatest bands that ever came out of Washington, DC. But there was a lyric once that said, it isn't what they're selling, it's what you're buying. And I always thought that was one of those profound statements because, again, do we play a role in hunger? Where do we shop? You know, do you shop at a store that doesn't pay a wage? And then the charity's got to come and say, can you give us some money to provide, to go buy food, to give people, the same people who serve your meals, something. So again, think about that. What role do we play in our daily life? Any other questions?
Don't be shy.
Dude, you look like you got something to say. I can read it. No, I'm feeling the vibe, man. I'm feeling it. I've been at GW long enough. I know the GW look. I know that look from a GW man who's about to say something profound.
No, actually, I'm a big fan of yours, and we are friends on Facebook.
Right on. Thank you. That's good. It's good.
I'm in a status just in case.
Oh, cool. Okay, I appreciate that. Okay.
But yeah, no,
What's your name?
I'm a big fan of the DC Central Kitchen model, and I've been following what you've been doing.
Right on. Where are you from?
Originally from Boston, but I do a lot of work with the DC government here, so.
Well, you know, it's funny because as we look to a mayor, you know, it's a powerful part of this, right?
Yeah.
26% of the workforce is nonprofits in this town. Now, you'd think a mayor would look at the DC Central Kitchen and say, let me get this straight. You're taking men and women who are coming home from prison who would cost us collectively 45 grand if they went back to prison, but because of your job training program, each year you produce 80 graduates who now earn $2 million in payroll taxes and pay $225,000 in payroll taxes to the DC Treasury, right? And you're doing school food, so you're giving them a job in which you're paying $12 an hour and benefits, and you're producing the best school meals we've ever had. A smart mayor would say, how can I help you grow, or how can I help other nonprofits evolve from the service culture of you're poor, here's some free food, come back tomorrow, to this. That's a big leap when you have the power of a mayor saying, in effect, I would like you all to grow. If we helped you build a super kitchen, could you take the entire DC Public School contract?
I guess that could be my question then. Has there been any indication?
I knew it. See, I knew.
Because I've seen I really like the videos, and I've seen online the video you did for the school program, and you're at like 11 schools or something like that.
There's, well, that might be campus kitchens, or is it?
I think you're talking about
The DCPS.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, 10 schools.
10 schools. So has there been any indication from like the Kaya Henderson, Vince Gray sort of people that you want to expand that a little more?
There's two things that are going on, we've been very lucky and thankful for the opportunity we've had at DC Public Schools. There's not a huge vision and understanding of the power in the relationship between nutrition and education and behavior and performance and health outcomes. They're really interested in put the food on the table, get the kids in and out of the cafeteria, you got 20 minutes, go, kind of thing. I think because of the way we perform, they would be interested in us expanding a bit. But part of it's difficult to work within the system. And as Robert said, most of the men and women we train and therefore employ are felons. And there's some very opaque and convoluted background checks that happen. And as long as we continue as a society to prevent people who've had an offense that should not prevent them from working in schools from doing that, we're not going to be able to do as much as we should, and people will continue to go back to prison and cost us all money. So we are looking for other opportunities. One of the things we would absolutely like to do is not do all 122 schools, but make sure we're the locally sourced scratch cooked tomato sauce provider for all 102, carrot sticks, broccoli florets. So we're really in business to change the way Chartwell, Sodexo, Aramark is doing their business. We're here to dispel these myths that this is possible, and then make them say, shit. I guess we can't rely on, we can't tell people it can't be done anymore because these church guys, these central kitchen are doing it. We should be able to do it too. And then they can take their resources and do it as well. And that's what we're trying to do.
But you know what else is tough? When we go for the contract, we compete with for-profit businesses, and if it's a minority-owned business, they get a 10-point thing. And it's like, but we're nonprofits, we're not owned. So the system, you know what I mean? So in other words, one of the barriers to what we're talking about is an old way of doing business that I dig, but it's electing a generation of people who don't look at your generation and say on graduation day, congratulations, now choose. Do you want to make money or do you want to do good deeds? You know, do you want to be a .com or a .org? Because what I see, and I don't want to generalize, is a generation looking to do both. And that's the future. But you have to elect people who understand that's possible. That, you know, the future isn't necessarily attracting a big box store. It's enabling a powerful nonprofit in the basement of a shelter to do more business, because we're going to put all our profit into the city over and over and over again forever. Dude, did you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned that you're changing the dynamic of a plate, sort of trying to change it.
I'm interested in that, yeah.
Yeah, well, so I'm wondering if you foresee any real pushback from seniors who are probably going to be used to an ingrained idea of, you know, the slab meat.
Right.
And we're going to say, you know,
Where's my pot roast? Where's my chicken? No, I'm down with that. And I think, again, the idea is to experiment right off the bat with different formulas to see what works. And again, anticipate that you have 5 years before the real big wave hits. In other words, it's like when you saw the picture of the tsunami and the wave goes out and everybody watches. That's what we're in the now. There's a sense of something bad's about to happen, but it's not here yet. I'm building for that eventual resurgence, knowing what's coming. But I don't want to, again, push too many people too early. So the idea is to be respectful of the process. But that's why I'm very interested. California is also the seafood side of things. But let's look at to Jose's point, the global thing is actually exposing us. Look at quinoa. You know, suddenly there's new forms of protein that people in America didn't know about 5 years ago. We laugh in our business sometimes that if I had been at a party 5 years ago and somebody was talking, they're like, dude, Greek yogurt, you know? It would have been like, or kale chips. You know, it'd been like, good luck with that, dude, you know? But you get my point. So I'm fascinated by trends. Again, that's a big deal when you think about it, because what seemed crazy is now there. You know, a lot of my interest in seniors was born because, weird as it sounds, but it's just a way of thinking, and if I can project that. But when I was a kid, Hunter S. Thompson, one of my favorite writers, did an article about marathoners in 1971, and it really was made out to be a little teeny band of super freaks. Because who would run 26 miles? It was an absurd concept. So it would have seemed preposterous if he had put at the very end, by the way, because the baby boomers are marching out and there's 80 million of them, eventually they'll reach a point in their lifespan where they'll want to prove they're still young, and they'll run these marathons. And so I predict that in 30, 40 years, marathons will sell out across America. That would have seemed a completely preposterous idea. It happened. So the question becomes now, if that same thing happened, what can you predict that same wave of older baby boomers will do when they hit here? That's what I do now. I'm just saying the same things that seemed improbable will most likely happen. So this idea of building a business around taking food that was vegetables and fruit and preparing super healthy meals in anticipation of a generation that will demand it, I think that's where there's going to be ability to create a very interesting new kind of business. And it isn't the solution. It's just, as Mike and I have oftentimes talked, Mike doesn't want to be the school food provider. He just wants to prove that you can do locally sourced, cooked from scratch and still pay a living wage to your workers. And once you've proved it, it's hard to go back. Yes? Yeah?
Do you guys have a training program to capitalize on all of the youth that are into service and want to recreate what you guys are doing, but take it to other cities?
We've always been open source. That's my entire bag. You know, I have no interest in controlling or owning. In fact, just so you know, one of my proudest, I think, things that I was able to help nurture at DC was the Campus Kitchen Project. And the idea was there's 60,000 school cafeterias in America where your entire generation went to school, but my generation said, okay, everybody on the bus so we can drive down to the inner city, which frankly just reinforced dopey stereotypes about hunger and poverty. As opposed to saying, wait, let's just go down to the cafeteria in the afternoon and start an after-school cooking club. You know, and so we have 34 now, and we're about to have a gathering in which the Food Recovery Network, which was born out of the University of Maryland, Swipes for the Homeless, which came out of UCLA, and Campus Kitchens are all converging in Chicago to basically say, let's come together and create a movement so that student-driven hunger relief can bring kind of this pantry system into a new era. So it's the students of the future, as always.
So unfortunately, we have no more time. Thank you, Robert Eggers.
Thank you all very, very much. Thank you.
Class, seven of the work you're preparing for the end of the semester of this class, the final project, are about snaps, food stamps, Secretary doesn't and or hunger issues. So I'm very happy because it is over 25% of all the work, so this is great. So I'm only gonna tell you, people think like there is no tomorrow. Because if you can be pretentious about something and bold about something, it's about how we can make sure that hunger is something of the past and not something of the present going into the future. So be bold and be pretentious. We have to think that we can end hunger in America. So maybe we have a chance to end hunger in the world. But we have to start here at home. And we hope that people like Robert and Courtney are going to be helping us breaking the code. Because I believe it's within our fingertips a real opportunity to end hunger in America. We will need bold thinkers like